there.
There we go. All right. Thank you. Thank you. This is why we're running ahead of time to take care of some of these problems. A little bit about me again. As Kit mentioned, I've been with the Forest Service for a number of years. Actually, since about 1990, I started with the Northern Research Station up at Hubbard Brook Research Site, and I shifted over to air quality in 2008, and now I've been an air quality specialist for that period of time. And my focus is the 9 northeastern states, including Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and New England. And again, my focus is on the Allegheny National Forest, White Mountain National Forest, Finger Lakes, and Allegheny. So some of the graphics that I'm going to be showing today come from multiple sources. Just want to kind of give credit where credit's due. RX410s, smoke management techniques, NWCG, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, many different websites there, and EPA as well, many different websites. I pulled information from there. Start off with National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS. We call them NAAQS all the time. Designed to protect the most sensitive portion of the public. EPA periodically reviews the standards and the science behind them to determine whether changes are warranted, and must have an adequate margin of safety when they develop those numbers. If you are in an area where it's good air quality, it's called an attainment area. But if you're in an area that does not meet the NAAQS, or National Ambient Air Quality Standards, for one of the 6 criteria pollutants, you're considered to be in a non-attainment area. These areas are designated using high quality air monitors run and overseen by the state air agencies. Usually it's a whole county or partial counties that are designated as being non-attainment, if that's going to be a poor air quality area. And permitting new industrial sources in non-attainment areas requires more steps for any new industry that's being developed for those sites, and that may be seen to hinder economic development. Air quality data related to exceptional events may be removed from data set by EPA after being petitioned by the state. If exceptional events is a new phrase for you, just hang out here. I'm going to be talking about that more a little bit later, but that's an important thing for the state regulators. How many in the room have seen this picture on your right with the hair and the beach sand? A couple of you? Okay. A couple of hands here and there. Okay, so let's go over this really quick. The focus of the talk again today is standards and EPA changes, focusing on PM 2.5. So how small is PM 2.5? It's 2.5 microns in size. Pretty tiny. Goes right into your lungs, into your bloodstream, and it can affect your whole body. So how does that compare to beach sand, for instance? Beach sand is about 90 microns. Again, 2.5 is 2.5 microns. This is a hair, human hair, again, not the scale, obviously. Dust, mold, about 10 microns over here. And I'm not sure the folks in the back can see these little tiny red dots here. Those are the 2.5 micron particles. But bottom line is they're tiny and they go into your bloodstream and they can affect your health. That's the big issue here. And the changes that were put out last year by EPA changes the annual standard from 5 micrograms per cubic meter to 9. It's a 25% cut in the annual standard. 24-hour standard hasn't changed. A key part of the standards as well is how they determine those standards. For the annual standard, they take the annual mean of a year and average that over 3 years. For the 24-hour, they look at 90th percentile averaged over 3 years. So you need to be clear of what you're looking at and what the standards are for that. So for the new PM 2.5 standards, a lot of folks are like, oh my God, the sky's falling. Don't do this. Don't panic. Pause. Don't panic. So the new PM 2.5 standard, hasn't this happened before? Hasn't there been upgrades in the 2.5 standards over the past 50 years? Actually, yes. Starting in 1970, when the first US particulate standards were established by EPA, those numbers have been coming down, but every 10 years or so, based upon new science that's out there saying, how is this affecting human health? That's the bottom line again. So when you see 97 updates, 2006 updates, 2012 updates, 2024 updates, and again, for the 2024 updates, the 24-hour hasn't changed. It's the annual standard that's changed. And if I sound like a broken record here, I'm doing that on purpose. We've been down this road before. We've seen changes. We've been able to continue burning, and I strongly believe we're going to be able to keep that momentum up. Looking back at 1977, on the left behind me here, you see that standards were much higher then, and there were a lot of areas that were considered non-attainment. PM 2.5 levels were too high above the standards. Fast forward to the right, the map on the right, and you see 2022, much more stringent PM 2.5 standards, but there's much fewer areas that are in non-attainment. But as you can see, little dot, little circle here, Pittsburgh area, Allegheny County, that will pop up in every map I show you today. That's the one spot in Pennsylvania that's non-attainment right now for PM 2.5 standard. And again, there's a little more depth here. There are 2 other counties in Pennsylvania that are in maintenance mode, and that's basically at one point they were non-attainment, but they're okay now. But the EPA kind of just watches them to make sure that they don't bump up into non-attainment. In Allegheny County, when we say moderate, when we say non-attainment, it's a moderate non-attainment, as opposed to a lot of California areas. It's not moderate. It's much worse than moderate. So if you want to feel better about that, you can say, well, we're not the worst people in the country if you're in Allegheny County. And so this is a draft map. It's PM 2.5 NAAQS based on 2021 to 2023 data. That's the most recent data we have to look at. Some of the things looking at here, focusing on Pennsylvania, in the Northwest, that green blob there is Allegheny National Forest, as are all the other green blobs across here, national forest lands. The pink areas are are areas where the PM annual standard is above that 9 micrograms per cubic meter. So those are areas that the state and EPA are looking at right now. A couple of areas along the southern part of Pennsylvania. And again, this is just draft information. This isn't the information that's going to be used to develop the actual new standard, but this is what we're looking at for right now. So we have available to look at. And if you're just curious, you can see there's a bunch of pink areas in the West Coast. Those are wildfire crisis strategy locations. So the Forest Service has been focusing on those areas to try to reduce the smoke impact from wildfires, including through timber management and prescribed fire increases. Again, another map of the U.S. here. This is looking at PM 2.5, the annual standard. Again, this is the annual standard. This is the one that's been updated. And so everything red is the above the 9 micrograms per cubic meter, and that's the areas that we're looking at. And again, this is the data that's 21 to 23, not the data that's going to be used for the actual setting the non-attainment area. But you can see again, Allegheny County is red down there, and some of those other counties in the southern tier of Pennsylvania are also red. The blue sites are all below the standard. And moving on here, similar map. This is the daily standard. This is the one that has not changed. And there's mostly blue across here. If you look at Pennsylvania and a few of those pink sites in Pennsylvania, those are the maintenance modes. Those are again the areas where they were in non-attainment in the past, but it looks like they're going to be continuing into attainment in the future. A key here. So what do we do looking forward? 6 key steps to look forward and how to keep things going for prescribed fire. Evaluate smoke dispersion conditions to minimize smoke impacts. Monitor the effects of the fire on air quality. Number 3, highlighted, record keeping of BSMPs, fire activity and smoke behavior. Keep records, keep your records. If something happens and the state comes down and said, hey, were you burning this day? And yes, do you have pictures? Do you have information about this? Can you share them with us? So they may be calling on you for future information. BSMP number 4, this one probably should be highlighted as well. Communication, super important, as we all know. If the public doesn't have if you don't buy from the public, we're going to have problems. So a lot of communication before, during, and after. Number 5, second to last one here, consider use of emission reduction techniques. They're all across the board, different ways to reduce your emissions. from timing to looking at the fuels and everything else. Number 6, share the airshed with others. And that's probably less of an issue for Pennsylvania as a whole, unless, again, you're in those areas where there are non-attainment areas. This is probably more of an issue for southeastern U.S., where they do a lot of prescribed burning. And in western areas as well. You need to sort of get your piece of the pie, and if you don't reserve it early enough, then you're not going to let you burn. Some areas of southeast. Air quality index. Who in the room has heard of the air quality index? Oh wow, lots of numbers, lots of folks. Great. So really brief, the AQI, air quality index, is EPA's tool for communicating about outdoor air quality and health, public health. You want to focus on 2 things in this: is the green and the yellow. Anything below 100 AQI for PM 2.5 is considered healthy. Anything above 100 is considered unhealthy. And then it breaks up between those above 100 and below 100. But that's the focus on this. And with the new National Ambient Air Quality Standard for PM 2.5, the breakpoints are changing, but we don't need to get into that right now. But basically, if it's an unhealthy air quality day, you probably don't want to be burning. And you might not even be allowed to burn. There's 2 things going on in this particular slide right here. One thing is homework for you guys and gals, is do your burn areas overlap with any potential non-attainment areas? That's just the question, keep in the back of your mind. The other part of this slide is an example of a good communication outreach effort by the Pennsylvania Game Commission on their website, screenshot here. Controlling burning rejuvenates wildlife habitat and improves opportunities hunting. This map will serve as a platform to inform the public of upcoming past prescribed burns, last modified November of 2024. Great example, again, having information out there for different groups to know what's going on and what's planned in the future. I mentioned exceptional events earlier. This could be talked about for hours on end, but I'm not going to do that. But just overall, exceptional events is if Pennsylvania looks at a year and says, oh my gosh, we've had 2 or 3 weeks where we exceeded the National Ambient Air Quality Standard, and it was in June, and it was in 2023, and were we burning those days? What caused those high PM levels? And it's like, oh, was that Canadian smoke? Maybe. Let's look at the data. You can use satellite data, you can use modeling data, and then they'll have to go through and do this process and say, okay, yes, smoke came from Canada in those days, and here's our justification to ask the EPA to remove these days from the record, the portion of the record that makes you attainment versus non-attainment. The EPA looks at that and says, okay, yeah, you guys did your homework. Yes, we concur that those days were a lot of smoke coming from Canada. We're going to remove those from your record for this. So that way you don't get bounced automatically in non-attainment for PM 2.5 caused by others. But it's a big process. And again, if you happen to be burning on some of those days, the state might come and say, hey, share those records with us. We know we're okay, but one more thing to have in the record for EPA to make it easier. But that's a really brief part of that. State notifications. Todd, I think I have this right, but I know you mentioned there's been some changes. So prescribed burns should be reported to DCNR and DEP in Pennsylvania. So prescribed burns in Pennsylvania, you must submit a written notification or electronic, I guess, electronic notification, including burn plan to the DCNR, Bureau of Forestry, provide details of the burn location, date, and plant activities at least 25 working days before the burn is to occur. Does that make sense, Todd? I see him nodding. Thank you. And he mentioned that 24-hour notification and send this information to appropriate DEP office at least 24 hours before the burn takes place. Let's get that right also. Okay. So again, it's you might hear this a couple times today, but just changes that are happening and just notify those folks what's going on. If you haven't been to the Prescribed Fire website from DCNR, then I would recommend you do that. Quick screenshot here from that site. Lots of great information here, including on the right, additional resources. You can get your fire plan templates there. You can get your complexity ratings there. You can get the historical data that Todd shared earlier, US Air Now, Air Quality Index data, and down near the bottom right, Prescribed Fire Council website link. Great group, good plug for those folks here. So help out the Prescribed Fire Council however you can, and that's a quick link to them if you want to get to that site. Moving on. So what's going to happen in the future? As with most things, we can't predict the future, but background PM, particulate matter, from industry and transportation has been going down in the east, and this is expected to continue. EPA is going to be issuing the final attainment designations based on 2022 to 2024 data in early 2026. So data I showed you earlier is the 2021 to 2023 data. So that's not what EPA is going to use to say up or down, or you guys attainment or non-attainment. It's going to be the data that it's been collected, but it hasn't yet been analyzed. So those maps I showed you, they might be changing a little bit. They might not. We don't know again until until PA Pennsylvania analyzes that data. And they're going to be using air quality modeling. They're going to be using perhaps tempo satellite data to determine that information. So that'll be future. And looking at the future, again, don't know for sure, but looking at 2023, 2032, the EPA projects more than 99% of the counties in the U.S. will meet the revised fine particulate pollution standard. Again, that new 9 micrograms per meter annual standard. And this is based upon what they've been looking at since 1970. Prescribed fire, as we all know, risk management decision. It's an assessment of future with a lot of unknowns. Some sidebars unknown about what the future holds. We have a lot of work to do to increase the pace and scale of prescribed burning. Our response to this issue should be in proportion to the risk. And key thing here is do your homework, communicate with those around you and the public and the state folks. Do your homework. Impacts of the proposed NAAQS will vary depending on your location. And again, if you're near some of these sites that are in maintenance mode or non-attainment, your rules might be a little bit different. This is what Todd already showed earlier, 2023 and 2024 data. So just basically 15,000 acres per year has been the average over the past decade with some ups and downs.